And I think what's already been said with Brian and Michelle is that, there is some torment there around the whole celebrity and being successful very young and all the other things that have happened since there. So it's certainly a very tragic and somewhat obviously complex situation to have evolved to this point.
It's been 7 years now since he crashed into that fire hydrant. That is a lot of time, though, Gary, isn't it, in which to come right? And there's only been that one victory since. His golf hasn't come right, let alone what we know or don't about his personal life.
No, but the fire hydrant, symbolised a whole lot of other things that went on. I mean, the family, sort of the way in which that occurred in terms of the family implications, but also the massive shame and humiliation. I mean, all the attention that had been on this wonderful sportsman suddenly turned around totally, and the exposure and the scrutiny largely since that time has been shame and humiliation, and your identity changes and all those things happen as well. So in some ways that's been sitting behind it all, as well as the physical injury that he's had to deal with as well over the more recent years in particular.
Yes, I agree with all of that, absolutely. And I suppose just the point that I'm making is that fame is corrosive, or can be really corrosive for people.
Absolutely.
For one thing, you're expected to live up to an image that after a time you probably can't live up to anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we see that all around us.
But what is interesting is when you look at his great strength prior to his downfall, in inverted commas, it was his mental strength. It was his capacity to ignore everything that went on around him and focus entirely on the golf. And when his father was training him to play golf, I understand he used to quite deliberately have distractions when Tiger was about to hit the ball, like he'd hit a pot lid noisily, or he'd flash something or click something, so that he had learned just to focus on his game. And golf is a mental game. Yes, it's physical, but it is about mental strength. What I find interesting is that mental strength has clearly deserted him, and in the troubled times that he was unable to use that mental strength, which did exist at one stage, to pull himself back. And we've seen many examples of people who have gone through tragedy and hardship who do pull themselves back on track. But clearly he was unable to do that.
But I think one of the problems is that there is a level of expectation from you that you're constantly being expected to meet. And an example in New Zealand, I think, though clearly it hasn't happened yet and hopefully will never happen, is Lydia Ko.
Yes.
I mean, you wonder how a young woman like this can cope with this level, not only of fame, but this level of expectation. You're a golfer, and if you go out and...
Yes, the golf thing is so critical in that regard. I mean, golf is Michelle says, is a mental game in all sorts of ways.
Yes.
Mental in terms of who play it. But I think the expectations are massive. And what you've pointed out with Lydia, I think, is an important aspect as well, is that there's so much expectation. Once you reach the top, then all the time people are expecting you to deliver those outcomes, and you have to have your mind and body working together. And when you're already preoccupied with what's going to happen,
we do that all the time, Brian and I.
Yes. But you're right, Gary, and you may not fail. That's the thing.
Gary, thank you very much. I'm sorry we're just out of time, but that was great analysis. Question is whether he can come back. Michelle Bogue, Brian Edwards, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, Wellington's mayors have just put up their hands for a new covered stadium. We will get the details. Residents of a West Auckland suburb celebrate news. Their homes will be saved from demolition after Watercare chooses another site for its water treatment plant. The Guardian's Walter Shapiro on the Jared Kushner saga and the misery that awaits him. Controversy mars Team New Zealand's win against Artemis on day 3 of the America's Cup. The Green Party list, we look at it. MPI orders a sports drink company to add more sugar to Year 13 students head to Parliament, with a petition calling for the GST to be scrapped on sanitary products and a $270 million compensation bill for British Airways.
RNZ News at 5. No, my good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. The decision to build a giant water treatment plant in West Auckland has sparked both outrage and relief. Two sites were under consideration to replace the 87-year-old Huia plant. The Parker Road option in Oratia would have demolished 18 homes, but the Titirangi decision will mean the destruction of native bush. Tina Lee Viskovich from Oratia says it's been a tough, sleepless 4 months since the community first found out their properties may be at risk, but that all ended today.
Huge relief. I just can't wait to get home and be with the community, have big hugs. So it's going to be some good sleeps this week. Maybe not tonight. I don't think we'll be sleeping, we'll be celebrating.
Tina Lee Viskovich from Oratia. Svetlana Gubanova from Titirangi says she's pleased for the Oratia community but furious for her own. She says the community will be turned into an industrial site and Woodland Park Road will be no longer. A new code to cut junk food advertising aimed at children is being rubbished before it's even got started. The Children's and Young Persons Advertising Code takes effect from July, but public health and obesity experts say the new definitions are too vague and won't hold advertisers to account. Under the changes, advertisers need to take care when a quarter of the audience are children. Obesity expert Robin Tumath says the 25% rule is a nonsense.
The number of children watching that is the issue at stake, and we know that children watch television at quite young ages up until 9 o'clock at night. So it's absolutely clear-cut that if you don't want kids to be bombarded by ads which are going to be unhelpful for them, then they should not be shown before 9 o'clock at night.
Dr. Robin Tumath. But the Advertising Standards Authority rejects that, saying the new code bolsters the restrictions on junk food advertising to children. The sports drinks company SOS Hydration is being urged to present any new evidence it has about the effectiveness of low-sugar electrolyte drinks to regulators. The Ministry for Primary Industries has ordered SOS to dramatically increase sugar content to meet the definition of the electrolyte drink or face a fine. The company says there's a wide body of research that supports its claims, but the Ministry's Food Risk Manager, Roger Cook, says he's not aware of them and the standard set by Food Safety Australia and New Zealand is based on international research.
The science tells us that you need to have the high sugar levels to drive the active pump, if you like, to carry the water from the athlete's gut into the bloodstream. Without the high levels of carbohydrate, you don't get that instant rate of rehydration that the athletes are after.
Roger Cook there from the Ministry for Primary Industries. The Green Party membership has sent a clear message to the party leadership that they want more fresh faces in Parliament. The party's delegates and candidates drafted an initial list earlier in the year that was sent out to members for ranking. The final list was released today, with former Auckland mayoral candidate Chloe Swarbrick and human rights lawyer Gaules Garaman shooting up the ranks. Some existing MPs also slipped down. Mojo Mathers down 3 places to 11 and Denise Roche down 1 to 15. David Clendon remains at 16, the lowest ranked current MP. He says that's politics.
Well, certainly there's been a huge push. The language has been about refresh, renew, and there are only so many places on the list, I guess.
The Green MP David Clendon there. Universities are adopting a new system that would stop people claiming degrees and qualifications they don't actually have. They say the secure electronic system will make it easier for students to show employers copies of their qualifications that cannot be faked. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
All New Zealand and Australian universities are rolling out MyEquals, which holds digital copies of qualifications. Universities say it will save everyone a lot of the time and effort involved in verifying qualifications. It will also make forgeries and deception much harder. They say international studies show a third of qualifications claimed in job and course applications are exaggerated or false. The University of Auckland introduced the system in April, and other New Zealand universities will join it over the next 10 months. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
An Australian woman who killed 3 of her children by deliberately driving a car into a lake has been sentenced to more than 26 years in prison. Akon Gwodi, who's 37, had pleaded guilty to the murders of her 4-year-old twins and her 16-month-old baby. She also admitted the attempted murder of a 5-year-old who survived after she was pulled from the water. Gwodi had driven her 4-wheel drive into a lake near Melbourne in April 2015. The judge said Gwodi, who survived the civil war in South Sudan, suffered post-traumatic stress and had depression, but the reason she drove her children into the lake remained unclear. It's 5 minutes past 5. On to sport now. Team New Zealand can count themselves lucky. They came away with a win over Sweden in their only race at the America's Cup today. Sweden were penalised going around the final mark, handing the victory to New Zealand, but race officials later conceded they got that call wrong. However, the result stands, and Team New Zealand helmsman Peter Burling says they'll take some learnings from it.
Had a pretty similar incident to that and actually the Portsmouth World Series, and we kind of thought it was pretty tight, but it was something that we've actually got a lot to work on from today. We definitely weren't sailing as good as we should upwind and in the corners, so we've got a lot to go back and review on now.
Peter Burling, and Team New Zealand meets Sweden again tomorrow. The Chiefs midfielder Charlie Ngatai will miss another week of Super Rugby because of concussion symptoms. Ngatai returned for the Chiefs earlier this month after a year-long layoff because of concussion symptoms, which have since come back. The Chiefs face the New South Wales Waratahs in Hamilton on Saturday. And the New Zealand motor racing driver Scott Dixon is in doubt for this weekend's round of the IndyCars after it was revealed he had injured his foot in yesterday's spectacular crash at the Indianapolis 500. Dixon was sporting crutches today and has his fingers crossed he can compete in Detroit this weekend.
Just trying to keep some weight off it, and we're not sure if it's a bit of a sprain or some heavy bruising or maybe a small fracture. We'll find out a little bit more tomorrow, but I think all in all should be fine.
Scott Dixon there, and that's the news.
White Shark.
I grabbed the rocket launcher up the top and I climbed up on the gunnel and I looked down and I said, well, I'll be buggered, there's a shark in my boat.
White Death.
You don't have enough sugar. I've got to put 10.5 teaspoons in to hit their guidelines.
White Legs.
I can tell you it's actually almost as pale as Susie Ferguson's legs might have been in the Scottish winter.
We do the serious stuff too. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espinel weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, what are the rules around the buying and selling of water consents, and should New Zealand follow Australia's example for a market-based system? And after 10, doctor and poet Glenn Cahoon on the doubt, dislocation and disadvantage he comes across daily as a GP in Horowhenua. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the up-to-date short forecast now from Met Service, taking us to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Northland to Manawatu, that includes Bay of Plenty in the central high country. Becoming cloudy, rain spreading east this evening, followed by showers, clearing in western areas south of Auckland in the morning tomorrow. Horowhenua and Kapiti through to Wellington, also Waitarapa. Cloudy periods, a few showers north of Wellington, spreading everywhere tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloud increasing, scattered showers developing overnight, fine spells developing tomorrow afternoon. Buller, Nelson and Marlborough, cloud and rain spreading east about now and through into the evening. Clearing in the morning tomorrow, becoming fine, apart from isolated showers about northwest Nelson. For Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain, easing in Fiordland tomorrow morning and clearing in Westland. Canterbury, fine for the rest of today, though high cloud increasing. Mostly cloudy tomorrow. There could be some isolated showers. Otago and Southland, cloudy for the rest of today. Scattered rain, isolated showers and afternoon fine breaks tomorrow. And at the Chathams, occasional rain. They should ease tomorrow afternoon. It is 8 minutes past 5.
Paul Brennan with RNZ News. Thank you, Paul. Coming up on Checkpoint, the Green Party. How much sugar is too little sugar if you want to be an electrolyte drink? And in an age of obesity and diabetes, does the answer make any sense? Plus Jared Kushner, the Russians, and the not fake future that may await him. But we begin with breaking news from the capital and in fact from the wider Wellington region, where the mayors whose constituencies make up the region have unanimously voted to support an indoor arena that would seat somewhere in the vicinity of 12,000 people. That's the equivalent of Auckland's Spark Arena, formerly known as Vector, of course. It's not a done deal. Whilst there will be ratepayer money involved, commercial backers will be required. But with Dunedin having Forsyth Bar and its roof, Auckland having Spark plus outdoor venues, Wellington has been losing gigs, most recently, of course, Ed Sheeran. With Westpac Stadium, an outdoor venue vulnerable to weather and seating just over 30,000, and the TSB Arena seating roughly 5,500, the absence of a large indoor venue has long been felt in Wellington. Just before we came on air, I asked Wellington Mayor Justin Lester how much he thinks the venue will cost.
Well, we've got $60 million set aside in our budget. That's already forecast in our long-term plan, but not until a few years away. The budget, you look at something like, well, what does the Vector Arena cost, for example? We're probably talking around $100 million, $120 million.
OK, so what do you think the chances are of this happening?
Oh, look, it's always a big project. It's never easy to get them across the line, but where there's a will, there's a way. and you need strong support and partnerships. And if we've got the other mayors in the region behind us, I think with a decent tailwind, we'll give it a good nudge.
Yeah, decent tailwind's never a problem in Wellington, Ro. What sort of gigs are you missing out on, do you think, as a result of not having a venue of this size?
Oh, look, we do get plenty of gigs, but we would like more. And we also recognise that the TSB Arena, which has been a good arena and has served the city, is getting past its use-by date. So we want to make sure we've got a modern facility that befits us as a capital city and one of the largest cities in New Zealand as well. So the types of gigs, I mean, I would love to have a gal who wants to come to Wellington anytime soon. Anybody that is prepared to tour New Zealand, want to make sure that Wellington's putting its hand up and saying, oh, look, you can come here too.
OK, where would you see it going?
From here, we're going to get a report back from the REDA, so Wellington's Regional Economic Development Agency. They'll come back to us in August. I know that we've already done a lot of work on this, but they'll come back to us and say, look, these are potential locations, this is the likely cost, this is the funding mechanism, this is how it would be apportioned across the region, and from there we can make some recommendations.
Can you tell us about those potential locations? What's the shortlist?
We'd look across the region. In my mind, it would make good sense to have somewhere close to the current Westpac Stadium. You want it close to public transport. You also want it close to your entertainment precincts. That would probably be a good starting point. But look, we'll look at all options.
Wellington Mayor Justin Lester, just before we came on air, Phil Spray is a Wellington-based promoter who's been bringing gigs to Wellington for many years. I asked him for his reaction.
This is years in the making. A number of us have been looking to try and get Wellington a decent-sized, workable, multi-purpose indoor venue in the right place at the right time, and now the time looks like it's arrived.
Phil, have you been trying to get gigs into Wellington that you've been unable to get because there simply isn't an appropriate venue?
I think everybody in the entertainment industry has been saying, as one of the the major cities of this country and the capital, that Wellington was the odd one out. Dunedin got its roof over its stadium, which is not quite the same thing, but it's indoors. Christchurch, as we all know, has had arenas all the way through, and now they're announcing a new structure, stadium arena that they're going to build. Auckland, of course, was the start of the indoor bigger arena with the Vector, known as Spark today, and we've been missing out. We've just not had the capacity to be able to handle it.
The very biggest acts, Beyonce, for example. How many tickets do you have to sell to make it viable to get her to your city, if she's touring in the neighbourhood, if she's in Australia, for example?
Well, most of those artists, if it can go into Spark in Auckland, then it can just on the same basis go into Wellington. The advantages are, and what I've been talking to the regional mayors on for the last few years, is saying there's a social element that people miss in this equation. Now, if you've got a couple of dollars in your pocket, it's very easy for you to jump on a plane, fly to Auckland, stay in a hotel, stay overnight and see a good concert, and that's fine. But 80% or 85% of the local population, in the Greater Wellington area, can't afford the time off work, haven't got the money for all the extra costs involved in going to see a concert beyond the ticket price, and it became a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-decade opportunity. And these are things that, everybody should have the opportunity to go to. There's a huge number of artists that people in this region have just missed out on.
Phil Spray, who is a concert promoter. If you're listening in Christchurch and wondering what on earth your future entails on this front, we're wondering the same thing, and we will look into it over the days ahead. There were tears of joy this afternoon as residents of a small West Auckland community learned their homes were safe from demolition. Ōrātia had battled Watercare, a subsidiary of Auckland Council, since February, after more than a dozen families were warned they could be uprooted to make way for a new water treatment plant. Obviously the city needs it, but Watercare's board today unanimously accepted a second option, essentially saying it preferred to destroy trees than homes. Zach Fleming was there and spoke to residents straight after the announcement.
Tears of relief, high fives and hugs all round as Ōrātia residents learn their homes are safe.
Oh, darn, just incredibly relieved. I guess, the community's been living on a knife edge for the last 4 months. People having anxiety and being able to sleep. So there's a lot of the community that will sleep easy tonight knowing that they're not going to be forcibly removed from their homes.
The small West Auckland community rallied quickly earlier this year after learning up to 18 homes could be demolished to make way for a new water treatment plant. More than 1,000 people attended local meetings, a website was set up and signs of support littered the surrounding area. Even local resident and Deputy Prime Minister Paula Bennett weighed in, saying Oratia was the wrong choice.
I know the distress that it's caused to a lot of residents to think that they might be displaced and not have alternatives actually to replace what they thought they were going to lose. So I'm thrilled for them.
The community have got each other's back, they've rallied, they've worked hard, thousands of hours by thousands of people. Everyone is so incredibly proud to be part of Oratia and be part of that.
The epicentre was Parker Road, a long winding cul-de-sac that residents said was one of the last remaining semi-rural havens of Auckland. Its northern end was identified as one of two best options to replace the 87-year-old Huia water treatment plant, which treats around 20% of Auckland's water. The second option, which was unanimously approved by Watercare's board today, was nearby Manuka Road, which is native bush. Watercare's infrastructure and environmental manager Mark Bourne today said Manuka Road was chosen because it's easier to mitigate a loss of vegetation than a loss of homes.
And that really was highlighted through the last phase of the project, which included community consultation, but perhaps more importantly, our independent expert in terms of social impact assessment, where we interviewed over 50 interviews. I think some 150 individual people were interviewed through that process.
And that's exactly what people like Tina Lee Viskovich have been saying for months. She grew up on Parker Road. Checkpoint visited her and her family earlier this year.
My mum's just taken in a foster child this year as well, who's already been to too many different houses this year. And we've promised him this is his forever home, and now he's standing out on the front lawn with a sign saying, "Please don't take my home."
Today, after learning her home was safe, she was overcome with emotion.
Mind-blowing. It's just been such an extremely intense journey. For 3.5 months, hardly anyone slept. So it's going to be a big party tonight and then a big sleep for everybody. They're already out there. I've just spoken to everybody's gathered at a wedding venue out on Parker Road. I think there's over 100 people there, and we've just given them the news now, and I could just hear everybody screaming and crying in the background. I just can't wait to be back there and hugging them all.
A Watercare board member did today express concern there would be pushback from, quote, people who love the trees by choosing Manuka Road. The company says it will bolster efforts to minimise the adverse effects on trees and establish a community liaison group.
I think the community's voice will be heard through the next process. I think one of the important things that up until now, the consultation we've undertaken has been of a voluntary nature. As we move through the process and actually start to apply for consents, a statutory process kicks in.
Watercare says it will apply for resource consent later this year. All going well, the new plant is expected to be completed by 2023. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Lots of feedback coming in on Wellington's new stadium, and lots of people asking why the Westpac Stadium isn't simply covered. The answer to Pracey, what Justin Lester told us before we didn't put this answer to air, is simply that it's too expensive. The stadium was not built to have a roof, so to put one on it is very complex and very difficult. Lots of people saying, well, it should have had a roof in the first place, and that is a different conversation. 5:18, a stoush over how much sugar sport drinks should contain, how much sugar they should contain, is causing a big fizz. The Ministry for Primary Industries has ordered the sports drink company SOS Hydration to add 5 times as much sugar to its product in order to meet the definition of an electrolyte drink. SOS says that definition is based on outdated science, but MPI says it's not aware of any new research that proves low sugar drinks are just as effective. Anusha Bradley reports.
An electrolyte drink must contain at least 50 grams of sugar per litre. SOS Hydration has 10 grams per litre. And following a complaint last year from an unnamed party, the Ministry for Primary Industries has taken action, writing to the powdered drink company to tell it to dramatically increase its sugar content or stop calling itself an electrolyte drink. Its Manager of Food Risk Assessment, Dr. Roger Cook, says that standard is based on international research and they have to enforce it.
Now, the science tells us that you need to have the high sugar levels to drive the active pump, if you like, to carry the water from the athlete's gut into the bloodstream. Without without the high levels of carbohydrate, you don't get that instant rate of rehydration that the athletes are after.
The co-founder of SOS Hydration, Thomas Mayo, disagrees.
I got an email from Dr. Ron Morn, which is the chair of the International Olympic Committee Medical Committee, and he welcomed SOS into the marketplace, considering the last 20 years of research he's done on the role that low sugar electrolyte drinks have in the marketplace. So this isn't new. This is coming from the chair of the IOC Medical Committee. So more is the question, what research aren't they looking at?
But Dr. Cook says he's not aware of any new research that says otherwise.
We haven't seen anything that is inconsistent with the regulation as it stands.
The Food Safety Minister, David Bennett, says it's not up to him to change the rules.
The FSAN standards are set. They're the requirements that sports drinks need to adhere to, and if the company's got an issue with those standards, they can certainly present to FSANs and make their comments.
FSANZ is Food Standards Australia New Zealand, the Canberra-based body that sets the guidelines. Its acting chief executive, Glenn Neal, says a review is not on the table.
No, we're not at the moment looking at reviewing those particular standards. When setting public health and safety-based standards, we'll always consider the best available evidence. So the company is certainly welcome to apply to change the code.
SOS said it would cost it between $30,000 and $40,000 to apply for a change, and it doesn't see why it should pay when there's already a large body of research out there about low-sugar electrolyte drinks. A professor of population nutrition and global health at Auckland University, Boyd Swinburne, agrees the rules need to change, but he has a warning for anyone who consumes sports drinks.
These beverages are used for minor types of sport where just simply water would do. I think it's a coup of marketing that they've penetrated so far into children's sport, and it's a real worry because they're often loaded with sugar, and I support the drinks company in suggesting that the standards need to be reviewed.
In the meantime, SOS Hydration has until the end of August to increase the sugar content or change the labelling to comply with the rules. For Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
The Green Party membership has sent a clear message to the party leadership that they want more young women in Parliament. The party's delegates and candidates met in February to draft an initial list that was sent out to party members for them to rank. The final list was released today with former Auckland mayoral candidate Chloe Swarbrick and human rights lawyer Golriz Karaman shooting up the ranks. Here's our deputy political editor, Chris Bramwell.
The Green Party relies entirely on party votes to get its MPs into Parliament, which is why a good list placing with the party is critical for candidates. The party's co-leader, James Shaw, says the list has a mix of experienced hands and new talent.
This list has new leading to our Māori and Pacifica voices. It has climate change activists. It has a human rights lawyer who will also be the first Member of Parliament to have started life in New Zealand as a refugee.
Golriz Karaman has moved 5 places up to number 10. Ms Karaman left Iran as a 9-year-old escaping persecution and war. She's a human rights lawyer and says that field remains her passion and will inform her work as an MP.
My focus will be human rights and sort of democracy building, and I always say it's sort of because I've seen the world without those things that I feel the real urgency in that, and those are things that have been sort of undermined by this government as well. So for me it's sort of upholding those very Kiwi values.
The former Auckland mayoral candidate Chloe Swarbrick has moved from number 13 on the list to number 9. Ms Swarbrick was put through her paces by reporters and asked what she thought of the government's budget.
The budget, as we know, it's thousands and thousands of pages. But on the face of it, I think that it is a placeholder budget. It is band-aids and an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. It presents no vision whatsoever for the future of our country. And I think that that is what people are crying out for at the moment.
The broadcaster Hayley Holt was the biggest mover, leaping from 29 on the list to 17th. She says she wasn't disappointed to have such a low initial list placing.
The reason I did this is because I really believe in the principles and the values of the Green Party. I'm here because I love New Zealand and I want to help spread the message. You know, I sort of relate to people who don't usually think about voting Green. So that's what I bring, and I'm just really happy that the Green Party believe in me too.
But in order for those young women to move up the list, there had, of course, to be some shuffling downwards. The Green Party staffer Jack McDonald slipped back from 9 to 13 and Wairarapa farmer John Hart down 2 places to 14. Some existing MPs also slipped down. Mojo Mathers down 3 places to 11 and Denise Roach down 1 to 15. David Clendon remains at 16, the lowest ranked current MP. He's putting on a brave face.
Well, certainly there's been a huge push. The language has been about refresh, renew, and there are only so many places on the list, I guess.
At the last election, the Greens won 11% of the party vote, which gave them 14 MPs. They estimate they'll need to get 15% at the September poll, then that will get them 18 to 20 MPs. A te wete whare pārimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Chris Bramalaho.
Up to 20,000 registered sex offenders in Australia will be banned from travelling overseas or holding an Australian passport under new measures signed off by the government there in a bid to crack down on child sex tourism. And what it's hailing as a world first, legislation will be introduced to Parliament this month, making it illegal for registered offenders to leave or attempt to leave the country without permission from the government. The Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, says that means they will have their passport cancelled to stop them travelling overseas to offend again. The move follows several recent high-profile cases of child exploitation overseas and growing community concern about Australians taking part in the child sex tourism trade.
Last year alone, almost 800 registered child sex offenders travelled overseas from Australia, about half of whom were in breach of an obligation under state or territory laws to notify police of their intended travel. About half of them had been recorded by police as being of medium, high or very high risk of re-offending. A number of them, almost 40%, had been convicted of offences against children under the age of 13, and half of this number had travelled to Southeast Asia.
That's Julie Bishop. The Justice Minister, Michael Keenan, described the laws as the strongest crackdown on child sex tourism ever.
No country has ever taken such decisive and strong action to stop its citizens from going overseas, often to vulnerable countries, to abuse kids. So this is absolutely a world first. Now, the Australian Federal Police have advised me that our current legal regime stopping Australians from doing this is completely inadequate, and that's why we've taken this action. We're determined to do what we can to stop Australians from engaging in child sex tourism. It is an absolutely abhorrent crime. The measures that we are taking, we're urging the Parliament to pass very quickly, will ensure that Australians will no longer be part of this very difficult global problem.
Australian Justice Minister Michael Keenan. Red-faced America's Cup officials have admitted they made a mistake and shouldn't have awarded a race to Team New Zealand in Bermuda. Just seconds before Sweden's Artemis was due to cross the line and win, the New Zealanders protested and were allowed to pass after an instant umpire call on the water. The officials say after a more detailed look they got it wrong, but there's no going back on the controversial call. Our America's Cup reporter Todd Nile is in Bermuda.
It was already a neck-and-neck race, and heading for the final gate into the finish line, Team New Zealand was on the back foot and knew something was needed. The helmsman Peter Burling says they tried to set it up so Artemis would lose the right-of-way at the turn, and when the Swedes got past, he hit the protest button.
I was kind of half underwater trying to push it on one side of the boat and then ran across to the high side just as we were, hopefully trying to get it pointing into one to keep it upright, and it was obviously not our normal kind of manoeuvre, and something that in that kind of breeze it's pretty easy to roll the boat over like that, so we're really happy that we kept it upright and kind of managed to come away with the win.
Was it a 50-50 punt from your point of view, or was it pretty clear?
We've actually had exactly the same incident in Portsmouth in the World Series earlier in the year, and we debriefed with the umpires a fair bit after that, so we had a pretty clear understanding of what we could and couldn't do, and from our side, you have to play the whistle, the umpire's decision, you respect that, so we're really happy that they got the call wrong.
Meaning that Artemis got the call wrong. When I spoke to the Swedes' helmsman Nathan Outeridge soon after the race, he was baffled.
I've watched the video back, I've watched the umpire app back. I haven't actually got a chance to speak to the umpires, but I'd like to understand the situation a bit better, because from my perspective, we gave him plenty of room, and I was a bit shocked to get the penalty, but it's not my position.
So what was happening on the boat at the time you got the call? What was happening on the boat? Did you talk about it? Did you believe it?
We were, ripping to the finishing line, doing over 40 knots. Thinking about trying to control the boat and take the beast, and when the blue light came on, I don't think anyone understood how a decision like that could be made. But, in the heat of battle, anything can happen, and so we just had to suck it up and take the penalty and hand over the win.
Have you had that in your career before, having to put the brakes on that close to the line?
Only in the America's Cup. And the America's Cup's the only racing I've done where they've been able to issue penalties electronically from a booth.
The chief umpire, Richard Slater, said that umpires watching the boats considered at the time that Artemis needed to keep clear and didn't.
We've had discussions, we've looked now at other evidence and information and data, and I think if we were to go back in time and make that call, we would green that call and not penalise Artemis.
Mr Slater says there's no provision to change the result now. Earlier in the day, he outlined in a media conference how the quick fire penalty system works.
They will press their buttons for claiming a protest, and that will come up on the umpire's system. We have a couple of little fail-safes in case that becomes a problem, but we then have a job list. We have to answer that question based on that. And the umpires in the booth are the ones who will turn the lights on and indicate the penalty. But that might have come from a decision from off the water as well.
The outcome doesn't materially affect anyone's future in the Cup, yet. At the end of next weekend, once the 2 qualifying rounds are over, the lowest ranked team goes home. Artemis is currently locked in equal last place on 2 points with SoftBank Japan and Groupama France. It needs to get out of there in the next 5 days racing to prevent the umpiring blunder from helping to end their Bermuda dream. In Bermuda, mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Todd Nile tēnei.
You're with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on the program, a $270 million compensation bill for British Airways. 2 Year 13 students head to Parliament with a very successful petition calling for the GST to be scrapped on sanitary products. The Guardian's Walter Shapiro on Jared Kushner, and boy, does he have some opinions on him. Nona on business. You can give us your feedback a number of ways, and we really welcome it. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We are, of course, on Facebook, and our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. 28 to 6, and here with the headlines is Paul Brennan.
Thank you, John. In our headlines, Wellington's mayors are taking steps towards building a major indoor concert arena for the region. They've directed the region's economic agency to begin investigating the case for an 8 to 12,000 seat arena by August. Wellington's Mayor Justin Lester says the city's lack of indoor concert spaces means major acts go elsewhere. The decision on where to build a giant water treatment plant in West Auckland has sparked both outrage and relief. 2 sites were under consideration to replace the 87-year-old Huia plant. The Parker Road option in Oretia would have demolished 18 homes, but the Titirangi decision will mean the destruction of native bush. Advertisers are rejecting claims that a new advertising code will expose children to more junk food advertising on television. With the Children's and Young Persons Advertising Code taking effect from July, public health and obesity experts are warning the new definitions are too vague and won't hold advertisers to account. The Advertising Standards Authority, Hilary Salter, says the new code does bolster the restrictions on junk food advertising to children. Food Standards Australia New Zealand says it won't review its rules on how much sugar should be in sports drinks until it's proven low sugar products are just as effective. The sports drinks company SOS Hydration wants the regulations changed after being ordered to increase the amount of sugar in its product by 5 times to meet the definition of an electrolyte drink. New Zealand First says it's just not right that KFC will be an official sponsor at the 2017 Rugby League World Cup, which New Zealand is co-hosting. It says 1.3 million Kiwis are overweight, and the KFC sponsorship deal sends the wrong message about obesity. And the Greens membership have sent a clear message to the party leadership that they want more fresh faces in Parliament. The party's delegates and candidates drafted an initial list earlier in the year that was sent out to members for ranking. The final list was released today, with former Auckland mayoral candidate Chloe Swarbrick and human rights lawyer Golis Garaman shooting up the ranks. Those are our headlines. Our next news and sport will be at 6.
We have more coming up on sugar and KFC, but before all of that, business news now with Nona Peltier in the Auckland studio. Beside me, building consents for April, Nona?
Yes, that's right. They're down, but
that could be because we had Easter and we also had the Anzac Day holiday. And so as a result of that, permits weren't issued. Could be that that's the reason.
Are they down on the previous month or down year on year?
They're down month by month
Right,
is the way that they work, but actually seasonally adjusted, they also fell. So, wait a minute. Permits fell. Yeah, they were down. Yes, they did fall. So, yeah, I guess the economists looking at this industry is not reading too much into it. Although some are saying, look, capacity is at a high level there. We don't have a lot of space. There's a lot of jobs that are not being filled. It's the same old story every month, isn't it?
And the government keeps saying the answer is the supply side, right? The answer to the housing crisis is the supply side. So they would be wanting to see building permits up, surely, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, you'd think. But, building permits are one thing, but it's the building themselves that's the issue. And no, we're not building enough houses fast enough to meet the demand. And that's underpinning the economic growth of this country in any case. So, there's a lot of jobs out there. I was talking to a fella from AWF earlier, I guess this week, or maybe it was last week. It seems like it's a big blur now. We've had a lot of companies reporting, which is going to lead very nicely into our next segment there. But he was saying that that company is working with other companies to train up young people in New Zealand to do some of these jobs instead of just bringing in migrants. But that's what they're doing right now, to bring in, the skilled staff necessary to build these houses, and not just houses, hotels, and you name it. So yeah, lots of construction going on.
You're talking about results. Main Freight was among them?
Yeah, Main Freight was the big one today. Of course, they're the biggest transport company in New Zealand, and people tend to look at them as a signal of how well the economy is going because, of course, transport. And if you're looking at Main Freight, they're definitely doing well. Their profit rose 16%, which is pretty healthy, to $101.5 million, which is also quite healthy. Their revenue was up 2%, so they're obviously doing better at making a profit, turning a profit. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So profit up 16, revenue up 2.
Yeah, revenue up 2%, exactly. Yeah. But, $2.33 billion.
Gosh.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, their share price moved up 1%. It was a different story for Orion Health, one of the other big companies that reported today. Not so good for them. They made a smaller loss, but the market didn't like it. Dropped their share price down 13%.
And what did the market do overall? Mixed fortunes for
actually, it was a little change. We've had a holiday in the United States, and the UK had a holiday too. Spring bank holiday. I don't know exactly what happens with that. But anyways, the market was down 8 points to 7,412. The New Zealand dollar was just a touch weaker. I mean it, just a touch. I don't know where Giles is, but it's not a tad, just a touch there. 70.5 US cents, 94.9 Australian, and 55 pence.
Nona Peltier, our business reporter here in Auckland. Thank you so much, Nona. It's estimated British Airways could have to pay more than $270 million in compensation to passengers affected by its massive computer system failure. After 3 days of chaos in which tens of thousands of passengers were simply left stranded, the airline says its IT systems are back up and running, and it will be operating a full schedule out of both Heathrow and Gatwick later today. The incident has been a PR disaster for the airline, but CEO Alex Cruz says he won't be resigning. He also denies the crisis had anything to do with the airline's shedding of hundreds of IT staff. Here's the BBC's Richard Westcott with more.
How can a computer glitch be allowed to cripple an entire airline? Spoilt holidays, weddings, honeymoons. 3 days in, the British Airways boss has broken cover to give his first interview, admitting their backup system failed.
The actual problem only lasted a few minutes. So there was a power surge and there was a backup system which did not work at that particular point in time. It was restored after a few hours in terms of some hardware changes, but eventually it took a long time for messaging and for systems to come up again.
Well, 3 days in, and Terminal 5 here is getting back to something like normality. But it's one thing sorting out the immediate problem and getting people on their aircraft. It's going to take BA far longer to ease people's anger at the way they handled the whole situation. The meltdown hit 75,000 passengers across the world, each with a different story, but one main complaint. No one was telling them what was going on. You've got to do a lot better though, haven't you, in terms of communicating with people? Because that is the number one... People accept there are problems sometimes. That is the number one thing that grates people.
We're fully aware that communications have to get better, particularly as social media continues to expand. We will continue to invest in resources in ways in which we can actually directly reach out to people.
BA made hundreds of IT staff redundant recently, outsourcing their jobs to India to save money. It's led to accusations there aren't enough experienced UK staff left to cope with a crisis.
Let me put this to Mr. Cruz. If they were still BA employees, we can assure him that issue would have been resolved in minutes and the systems would be up and running.
When I put it to Mr. Cruz, he flatly denied that outsourcing had made any difference. So totally unconnected, completely unconnected with all of those redundancies and with the outsourcing of the IT system.
Absolutely yes, in this case.
Apart from some short-haul flights from Heathrow, BA managed to fly most of its passengers today. Some still can't believe how badly the airline messed up.
I work in IT and they're blaming this on IT problems. It's basic enterprise practice to have a disaster recovery solution. They should have had their communication system and their booking system in different places so they could at least send us an email.
One estimate has put the compensation bill at around £150 million. You can't put a price on the damage to their reputation.
That report from the BBC. We cross now to the US and the question, how much trouble is Jared Kushner in? The answer depends on who you're talking to. His father-in-law, President Donald Trump, says none, but outside Tribe Trump, the assessments become more serious. Walter Shapiro is a lecturer in political science at Yale University, a fellow at the Brennan Centre for Justice and a columnist for Roll Call and The Guardian. In The Guardian overnight, his column is headlined, Jared Kushner's charmed life is about to come to a screeching halt. It's a brilliant piece of writing. And I asked him when Jared Kushner discussed opening that secret back channel to Moscow, he thought he was playing at.
I don't know. I mean, the point is that one could never, with the Trump administration, one can never underestimate the possibility for world-class stupidity or epic naivete. They may have thought, wouldn't it be neat that we could have secret communications with the Kremlin and we'll use the Russian embassy's communications tools. What could be better than that? And of course, back channels are often used in diplomacy, but they are used by the administration in power. When this meeting with Michael Flynn, the star-crossed former national security advisor, Jared Kushner, and varieties of Russians, including the ambassador, took place, it was in early December of 2016. When a fellow named Barack Obama was president of the United States. So I happen to find this meeting to be just an epic miscalculation, to put it charitably. I also put it charitably that Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, just had a haze of amnesia when he forgot to record the meeting on his government security clearance forms. I mean, we all forget things. He probably forgot that Obama was president. I mean, it's easy to be forgetful when you're about to be charged with bringing peace to the Middle East, solving the opioid crisis, bringing SWAT team business techniques to the White House, and protecting the new president, your father-in-law, from disloyal advisors.
I'm lost for words after that answer because this is all so preposterous and so absurd. So I'm going to quote your own words back. Even under the benign theory that Kushner thought that a secret back channel was like a small boy's tin can telephone, his life in the coming months and maybe years will be a study in misery. Why?
Why? Because under the American system, that if you are under scrutiny by the FBI. What this means is that every single public statement you make, Kushner has volunteered to testify before Congress under oath, So every sentence he utters will be scrutinized for a possible perjury conviction. There will also almost inevitably be many nice chats with FBI agents, and lying to an FBI agent is also a felony. Then there will be many document requests, many conferences with his lawyers to discuss the document requests, days of preparation with his lawyers for any public testimony. And what I do know is that when you are ensnared with the FBI, as it appears that Kushner is, that this just doesn't go away.
No.
And that he will end up spending more time with his lawyers than he will with his wife, Ivanka Trump, and their 3 children. And the idea of getting away for any more leisurely ski vacations when he's supposedly passing health care reform for the president in Congress is a charitable fiction. And since these are actions that have already occurred, if Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump decide to go back to New York, this will continue to haunt them. Because the real question is, what, if anything, improper did Kushner do either during the campaign or during his 4 months in the White House?
And if they go back to New York, and again I'm quoting you, their departure will accentuate Trump's fate as the loneliest man in Washington.
What that means is that there are fewer and fewer people in the White House that Donald Trump trusts. There are fewer and fewer people in the White House who Donald Trump has any relationship with prior to the 2016 campaign. And in every administration, there's a moment when a president looks around the staff table and asks himself, who are these guys? Where are the people I know? Generally, that comes well into a president's second term. For Donald Trump, it may come in his first summer in the White House.
Walter Shapiro, whose op-ed in The Guardian is a remarkable piece of writing. 2 students from Whangaparoa College up Auckland's north-eastern coast taking a petition to Parliament calling for the GST to be removed on sanitary products. Rebecca Jacobs and Melanie Wilcock were doing a school project that took off and then took off some more. I spoke to both Year 13 students via Skype video during their morning break this morning, and Melanie began by telling me how the whole thing came about.
Basically, we had to think of a policy or law we would like to change and study it and come up with a protest.
Social action.
Yeah, like a social action protest that we would carry out. But we were expecting it to not really go anywhere. We were kind of just like, oh yeah, it's probably just a school assessment.
We'll
and
just
then
get our friends to sign the petition.
Yeah, and then it just blew up and we're like, whoa, okay. It was really cool.
It's super cool. So what is the latest count? How many signatures do you have now?
Over 25,000.
Which is remarkable for any petition, but one that started as a school project. It's extraordinary, isn't it? So what does that speak to? Why are so many people signing this?
I think a lot of people just agree with us. It seems silly to tax something that we need. It's a necessity, and I think a lot of people agree with that. Which through social media it got a lot of a big following, and then a lot of people just agree that it's just a silly thing to have.
Yeah, it's something that affects all families, well, especially women who are single mothers and maybe they'll have 3 daughters, so they have to pay for their 3 daughters and themselves while trying to pay all their bills.
Yeah, my auntie herself, she was a single mother of 5 daughters. So I can imagine the price she would have had to pay for things like this.
Yeah, that's a ridiculous monthly cost. And as you say, it's a gender-specific cost because men don't menstruate, obviously. So men never pay this tax. The other issue is that there are now increasingly stories of people who simply can't afford these products at all. Are you hearing from those people? Have you heard those sorts of stories?
A lot of people who signed our petition, they left a little note, and a lot of people have said, especially like uni students have said this has happened to them, they can't afford them. And so they go without, or they take time off school or uni and just deal with it in a different way, but it's not good and it's not sanitary.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have been approaching MPs. What kind of response have you had?
We sent it to quite a few MPs and it's been sent off to Judith Collins, but we haven't had a response from her yet. But it's with her for a consideration.
And what sort of response are you after? Do you think that it is possible to remove GST from what's called sanitary products? Or is it just that you want to have a larger discussion about the cost of tampons and pads?
Well, we're starting off to make the discussion larger, but we believe that if our society comes together, that we can make a change, because if everyone comes together and fights for one thing that they believe is right, then we can make that change. We just need that support.
We are very happy just to have the idea out there and to be discussed, because
Create
it's an issue
awareness.
that hasn't really, people just ignore it a lot and hasn't really been out there very much.
And so what is the change you most want to make? If the momentum that this is already gathering picks up even greater speed and actually people in Wellington do start responding, what is it you would like them to do?
We would like them to respond towards the public and offer a way that they can help. So if the GST is unable to be removed, maybe talk about subsidising or getting, because I know Pharmac were talking about helping provide sanitary products for certain young girls. So maybe expanding on that and
Another way we could go about it is companies like the warehouse could simply take 15% off the price and leave the tax on there, because if that's easier within like Parliament and all that, leave the tax on there. However, companies that sell the product take that 15% off themselves and do something to help the cause.
That's Rebecca Jacobs and Melanie Wilcock, who are Year 13 students at Whangaparoa College. So what does the Revenue Minister, Judith Collins, think? Is removing the GST from sanitary products a possibility? Ms Collins was unavailable for an interview but told us there are no exemptions to the GST. She says there have been calls in the past for exemptions on essential items, but it has been decided that's not appropriate. She adds the government is supporting young women's access to sanitary products through initiatives like the 50,000 in funding for Kids Can to provide 16,500 packs to 2,000 girls in need, or 165,000 packs, I think. But what do the party leaders think? Bridget Burke asked them if they'd support the removal of GST on sanitary products, beginning with Māori Party co-leader Marama Fox.
Absolutely support the removal of GST on sanitary products, considering it is something that happens to all women and it's inevitable and no getting around it. But we also support the removal of GST off primary produce food, and I'm interested in what England does. They take VAT, or their GST equivalent, off everything to do with education and health, and I think we should be having greater discussions about innovative taxation ideas.
David Seymour from ACT New Zealand. There are real cost problems with sanitary products, but half of the GST will actually be eaten up by the seller, and in order to get a 7.5% reduction, you're going to create enormous tax complications for everybody that sells them. If you want to make sanitary products more available, taking GST off them is probably the most ineffective and complicated way you could possibly do it. But if people want to continue having the discussion about affordability of sanitary products, the way to do it is to give people cash rather than complicating the tax system.
Winston Peters, leader of New Zealand First. Look, this matter has got to go to our caucus. It hasn't been there yet. We certainly will have it up in front of our caucus next week.
Peter Dunn, Leader United Future. No, I wouldn't, because I don't support any changes to the GST system. But what I would support is sanitary products being able to attract a subsidy as medical devices, and I think they should be funded as such so that the cost will be considerably reduced.
Me Tiria Ture, Green Party co-leader. There's no guarantee that the savings will be passed on. The best option would be to have them provided for as part of the New Zealand Health Service, so people can access free sanitary products when they need it, in the same way that now people can access condoms, for example.
So, Rebecca and Melanie, that's the party leaders responding to your idea. Labour leader Andrew Little chose not to comment, directing us instead to his Youth Affairs spokesperson, Lewis Wall.
Our party line is sanitary products are not luxury items as they are in the UK. We do not have a differential tax regime, so we would not support the removal of GST from sanitary products. I know that there are a lot of women's groups around the country that for a long time have been sewing reusable products and sending them to other countries. And in fact, we may have a need for those particular resources here in our own country. I know that menstrual cups, and especially for our environmentalists, seem to be a sustainable way for young women to manage their periods. This will become an issue that I think we continue to debate until all need is met.
Labour Party's Youth Affairs spokesperson Louisa Wall. Police investigating the Manchester bombing have released new images of the attacker Salman Abedi walking with a blue suitcase. This comes amid reports that the UK intelligence agency MI5 was warned by its US counterpart 3 months ago that Abedi was planning an attack. Here's the BBC's June Kelly.
A young man in a hooded top, jogging pants and trainers on his own on a Sunday morning shop. He looks relaxed as he's captured on CCTV, browsing the shelves of the Manchester convenience store. His till receipt shows he spent £8.74 and he bought almonds, tuna, scouring pads and air fresheners. This was the day before the bombing, and staff in the shop believe this was Salman Abedi.
Looking at that CCTV, it's the same guy that's been in the shop several times in the past. He looks exactly like the guy that they're saying that has done the bombings. His eyes stand out so much from the guy that we recognise from the past.
In the police pictures, he appears to be wearing some of the same clothes. By this stage, he has the bomb on his back and is on the verge of committing mass murder. Tonight, police released new image of him in Manchester city centre on the day of the attack. They're trying to find his blue suitcase. They say they have no reason to believe it contains anything dangerous, but they're asking anyone who sees it to be cautious. Early today, their investigation expanded to the south coast. In the Sussex town of Shoreham-by-Sea, officers arrested a 23-year-old man. He's said to be a Libyan trainee pilot. Since the bombing, there has been criticism of the security service MI5. It's now reviewing the way it assessed Salman Abedi. He was not considered to pose an immediate threat. The Home Secretary has refused to be drawn on possible missed opportunities.
It's right that the MI5 are going to be able to look back and find out what has happened in the past, but at the moment I'm going to focus on making sure that we get the operation concluded and successfully so.
But after the arena atrocity, some are questioning whether an intelligence agency should be investigating itself. In the north of England, there have been more searches at new locations. Officers are also going through thousands of hours of CCTV as they work to build a picture of the bomber and those close to him.
June Kelly. The Health Minister says he's comfortable with KFC's sponsorship deal at this year's Rugby League World Cup. Jonathan Coleman is also Sports Minister. Here's our political editor, Benedict Collins.
KFC will be an official partner at this year's tournament, which kicks off in October and runs for 5 weeks. As part of the deal, KFC will have its branding and messages displayed on field signage and on the video referee board at matches played in Australia and New Zealand. Consumer New Zealand Chief Executive Sue Chetwin slammed the sponsorship deal, saying the link between fast food, obesity and rugby league fans was particularly insidious. The Sports Minister Jonathan Coleman, who is also the Health Minister, says while he understands those views, fast food sponsorship of sport is a reality in New Zealand.
And I could see why people would say that, but the fact is, at the same time, many of these events, and I'm talking specifically around grassroots sport, just wouldn't happen without food and drink sponsorship, and that's the balance you've got to achieve. You know, what is the bigger problem?
The Greens co-leader James Shaw is surprised by those comments.
I don't think it was a great look for Minister Coleman as the Minister of Health to be supporting a fast food outlet, you know, to support a sports program, because, you know, we do have kind of real issues here in New Zealand, and I would have thought he would have gone the other way on it.
New Zealand First's Sport and Recreation spokesperson Clayton Mitchell says with New Zealand's shocking obesity rates, the sponsorship is not appropriate. And he doesn't buy Dr. Coleman's argument that sport would suffer without fast food sponsorship.
I don't agree with that. I think there are places for sports to get better funding and more appropriate funding. I think this is an indication that might actually come to be true, that I think there are people out there that would get in behind a great event like the Rugby League World Cup. KFC, look, I just don't think it's right.
The Minister for Pacific Peoples, Alfred Naru, wasn't aware of the KFC deal, but says the government is doing all it can to fight obesity.
The focus of what we're trying to do is all around sort of issues around NCDs, non-communicable diseases, which includes a lot of our Pacific population. So it's around the diabetes. I know our district health boards have been working really hard to be able to get a whole lot of plans out.
Not a bit worried that KFC sponsorship undoes all that work a bit?
Well, I don't know about the KFC sponsorship, so can't really comment about that.
KFC declined to be interviewed. New Zealand Rugby League issued a statement saying the World Cup 2017 is an independent event that requires sponsorship to proceed. It said it understands and accepts that. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening, I'm Paul Brennan. Wellington's mayors are taking steps towards building a major indoor concert arena for the region. They've directed the region's economic agency to begin investigating the case for an 8,000 to 12,000 seat arena. Wellington's mayor, Justin Lester, told Checkpoint the city's lack of indoor concert spaces means it misses out on major acts which go elsewhere instead. He says the council has already budgeted $60 million, but the arena could cost as much as $120 million, and having support from the region's other councils will help get the project off the ground.
It's always a big project. It's never easy to get them across the line, but where there's a will, there's a way, and you need strong support and partnerships. And if we've got the other mayors in the region behind us, I think with a decent tailwind, we'll give it a good nudge.
Justin Lester says the investigations will come back with a cost, potential locations and how to pay for it. The decision to build a giant water treatment plant in West Auckland has sparked both outrage and relief. 2 sites were under consideration to replace the 87-year-old Huia plant. The Parker Road option in Oratia would have demolished 18 homes, but the Titirangi decision will mean the destruction of native bush. Tina Lee Veskovich from Oratia says it's been a tough, sleepless 4 months since the community first found out their properties may have been at risk. She says today's decision is a huge relief and they're celebrating tonight. Svetlana Gubanova from Titirangi says she's pleased for the Oratia community but furious for her own. She says the community will be turned into an industrial site and Woodland Park Road will be no longer. Advertisers are rejecting claims that a new advertising code will expose children to more junk food advertising on television. The Children's and Young Persons Advertising Code takes effect from July, but public health and obesity experts warn the new definitions are too vague and won't hold advertisers to account. The head of the Advertising Standards Authority, Hilary Salter, says the critics have got it wrong and the new code does bolster the restrictions on junk food advertising to children.
The rule says that if you are an occasional food or beverage and you're a product that will appeal to children, an execution that children will find attractive and talking to an audience of children, then the ad is not permitted under our new code.
Advertising Standards Authority Chief Executive Hilary Salter. The group that sets how much sugar should be in sports drinks says it won't be reviewing its guidelines until it's proven low sugar products are just as effective. The sports drinks company SOS Hydration wants the regulations changed after being ordered to increase the amount of sugar in its product by 5 times to meet the definition of an electrolyte drink. It says there's a huge body of research to show low sugar drinks are just as effective. But the acting chief executive of the Food Standards Australia New Zealand, Glenn Neal, says its standards are based on the latest evidence and it won't be making changes.
No, we're not at the moment looking at reviewing those particular standards. When setting public health and safety-based standards, we'll always consider the best available evidence. So the company is certainly welcome to apply to change the code.
That's Glenn Neal from Food Standards Australia New Zealand. Universities are confident a new computerised system will stop people faking their degrees. All 8 universities are adopting My Equals, which gives students access to digital copies of their qualifications. Chris Whelan from Universities New Zealand says the system will make it much easier for employers and other institutions to verify universities' degrees.
Mostly it's about improving the integrity of the New Zealand university system. So any employer, both in this country or internationally, can receive effectively a secure link, which provides them basically with assurance that the transcript or degree certificate that they're seeing has actually come from a real New Zealand university and is a real qualification or a real transcript.
Chris Whelan says China slashed qualification fraud after it introduced a similar system. The former military ruler of Panama, Manuel Noriega, has died. He was 83. Noriega, who ruled Panama from 83 to 89, spied for the CIA until the United States invaded and toppled his government. In March, he underwent surgery for a brain tumour. Noriega was initially sentenced in the US in 1992, but was serving a sentence for murder in Panama when he died. It's coming up to 5 minutes past 6. Sport now. Concussion symptoms continue to plague Chiefs midfielder Charlie Ngatai, who's been ruled out of Saturday's Super Rugby match against New South Wales Waratahs in Hamilton. Ngatai returned for the Chiefs earlier this month after a year-long layoff because of concussion symptoms, which have since come back. Meanwhile, Stephen Donald has overcome concussion symptoms he suffered against the Crusaders 2 weeks ago and is clear to play for the Chiefs on Saturday. Top-ranked New Zealand doubles player Michael Venus starts his French Open campaign tonight. Venus and his American partner Ryan Harrison take on Argentine Diego Schwartzman and American youngster Francis Tiafoe. First up, Venus and Harrison won a tournament in Portugal earlier this month, but the Kiwi hasn't had much success in Paris.
I think this is my fourth time here, and I don't think I've won a set yet. So we'll start with the first set of this match and try and get that on the board and then go from there.
Michael Venus there. Fellow New Zealanders Artem Sitak and Marcus Daniel are also playing doubles in Paris. Centre, Solomona Kata returns to the Warriors starting line for this Friday's National Rugby League match against the Parramatta Eels in Sydney. Kata had been sidelined for 2 weeks with a calf strain. And the New Zealand cricketers play their final warm-up match against Sri Lanka tonight before the start of the Champions Trophy in Great Britain. The match starts at 9:30 in Birmingham. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the First World War and the role it played in creating the modern gay rights movement. We have a wind on the wood of a group of Kenyan women kidnapped by al-Shabaab in Somalia and how they managed to escape, while this week's pundit, the historian Peter Clayworth, picks apart the myth of the Moriori, a flight of our early 20th century eugenic imagination, perhaps. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now we have the short forecast from Met Service taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Wednesday. Northland to Manawatu, that includes Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Becoming cloudy, rain spreads east this evening, followed by showers clearing in western areas south of Auckland in the morning tomorrow. Hortowhenua, Kapiti Coast through to Wellington, also Waited Upper. Cloudy periods with a few showers north of Wellington. They'll spread everywhere tomorrow. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloud increasing, scattered showers develop overnight tonight. Fine spells though from tomorrow afternoon. For Buller, Nelson and Marlborough, cloud with rain spreading east this evening, clearing in the morning, becoming fine, apart from isolated showers northwest of Nelson. For Westland and Fiordland, occasional rain. They should ease in Fiordland tomorrow, or the rain should in the morning, clearing in Westland. Canterbury, fine for the rest of today, increasing high cloud, mostly cloudy tomorrow, isolated showers. Otago and Southland, cloudy with scattered rain for the rest of today. Isolated showers and afternoon fine breaks tomorrow. For the Chatham Islands, occasional rain. That rain should ease tomorrow afternoon. It's nearly 8 minutes past 6.
Paul, don't go. Are you still there? Can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Excellent. We've just received a piece of feedback that I want to read out to you. I've just seen Paul Brennan for the first time. He is one good-looking man with a beautiful voice.
I work on it.
If
you work on it, you can look like me, folks.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul, and thank you for that lovely feedback. We totally agree with it too, by the way, that feedback. If you want to see Paul, we are on Freeview Channel 50 and Sky TV, Face TV, Channel 83. We are, of course, also on Facebook, which means you can tune in a multitude of ways and objectify Paul all you like. It's 8 minutes past 6. Thank you for being with us, however you are joining us. Question: when is an electrolyte drink in trouble? Answer: when it doesn't contain enough sugar. Now, this is determined by the Australian New Zealand Food Standards Code, drafted by Food Standards Australia and New Zealand. And they say that in order to sell yourself as an electrolyte drink designed for the rapid rehydration of high-end athletes, your product must contain between 50 and 100 grams of sugar per litre. SOS, a powder you mix with water, doesn't. And MPI, which enforces the standard, is telling SOS its insufficient sugar means it's in breach. I spoke to Dr. Roger Cook from MPI.
To meet the requirement of an electrolyte drink, it doesn't have enough sugar. Now, the science is very clear, and it says to get that rapid rehydration, you need to have sugar levels at that level to drive the active pump from the gut wall through into the blood.
Now,
you don't have that. Oh, sorry.
No, so, because I just want to clarify. These aren't your standards, right? These are from Food Standards Australia and New Zealand. So you didn't define what level of sugar is required in these drinks, did you? You are simply required to enforce it.
Yes, that is correct. MPI, this is not an MPI standard. This is a FSAN standard, and we have the role of enforcing that standard here in New Zealand.
Is it a stupid standard?
No, it's a science-based standard. It is based on the best science that's out there. It's been well consulted on before it was put in place, and we're not aware at this time of any science that contradicts the need for the standard for the purpose it was developed, which was for the high-end rehydration.
Okay, so the high-end rehydration, the problem is that I would say 95, 98, 99.6% of the people who drink this aren't anywhere near the high end. They don't even know what the high end is. They're kids walking home from school at the lowest possible end. In other words, this seems like a abstraction. It seems a kind of naivety to create drinks for the high end and sell them in dairies to the lowest possible end. Isn't this absurd?
It's certainly of concern to us because MPI, like Ministry of Health, are very concerned about the level of obesity out there in the general population, and we would not be recommending such high sugar drinks for the general population, and certainly, as you point out, for children just walking backward and forward to school. And for that purpose, water is perfect.
Okay, so you wouldn't recommend them for the general population because they're full of sugar. The one that isn't full of sugar gets in trouble because it's not full of sugar because it needs to be full of sugar for the high end. This is beginning to sound like some kind of elaborate practical joke. Now, I know that you are an enforcement agency, you don't write the rules, but it strikes me that in these circumstances, the rules are a bit of an ass because by and large, these drinks are bought by kids who want to be athletes when they grow up, but who are never going to be, right?
Well, no, John, because the rules actually allow these sorts of drinks, the low sugar drinks, to be sold from supermarkets, wherever you like. They just cannot have a health benefit that the manufacturers are claiming. So if they want to claim a health benefit of being a electrolyte drink, whether that be on the label or on their website or implying that they're an electrolyte drink, then they need to have good science to back up their health claim. So the product can be sold, it just can't be sold with that health claim.
What I'm learning from this is if I see an electrolyte drink, right, one that passes the standards and definitions, one that is not in trouble with MPI, and I drink it, I am drinking a whack of sugar.
That is correct. You're drinking a lot of sugar. And if you haven't been a world-class athlete and gone through an hour's worth of exercise before you do so, then you're drinking something you don't need.
Okay. That's a separate conversation, I guess, isn't it?
It is.
Okay, so in order to pass the standards, not drafted by MPI, but enforced by you poor buggers, drafted by Food Standards Australia, New Zealand, an electrolyte drink has to have more sugar in it than is useful for us unless we are a top-end athlete.
That is essentially the issue.
Okay. Who complained about this?
We can't go into who made
Can you give? No, I know. Can you give us a hint? Was it a competitor in the arena?
No. Look, anybody is allowed to complain. Individuals, companies.
So Roger, someone contacted you and said, "Gosh, there's a drink on the market that doesn't contain enough sugar."
We were contacted in July 2016 by a complainant. Yes.
Okay. And what happens if SOS don't up their sugar content? What are you going to be forced to do then?
Well, our job here is to actually work with them to find solutions to bring them back into compliance. We at the end of the day, we can actually put out direction notices of direction and seizure, but our preference is to work with such companies to bring them back into compliance, and they have several alternatives that they can do, all of which require some good sound science to back up their health claims.
So the choices are, it seems to me, stop calling themselves an electrolyte drink, right? Or
yes,
add a whole lot of sugar.
Essentially, yes.
Dr. Roger Cook from MPI. We turn now to the America's Cup, where Team New Zealand had another win this morning, but not without assistance and controversy. The New Zealanders were in trouble against a Swedish boat that was going very fast, but then the umpires called a penalty against Artemis and New Zealand took it. It was an extraordinary race, tight, the lead changing back and forth, and then the umpires called it and later admitted they'd called it wrong. I asked Ken Reid, twice US Yachtsman of the Year, former helmsman with Dennis Conner, and now worldwide America's Cup commentator for NBC, just how wrong the umpires got it.
Well, listen, first of all, to try to figure out the right and wrong in the sailing rules when boats are coming at each other going, 30 plus knots, it's not easy. Okay, so anybody says, "Oh my God, it was obvious. Something's obvious here. Something's obvious there." That's incorrect. Nothing is obvious when boats are ripping at each other. Now, with that said, I think I'm very proud of the umpires for coming out and saying, "You know what? I think we might have made the wrong move," because on television today, for sure, we called. I was surprised. I have to admit, I know just enough about the rules in this modern day America's Cup that I was surprised. I thought the Swedes were around the outside fine. I thought Emirates Team New Zealand, I don't think they could have gotten to them, and we made the call on television that we disagreed with the call that was made on the water. And sure enough, it sounds like there might have been a bit of a technical glitch. All of these calls by the umpires are done off of incredibly technical, detailed, GPS-driven computer screens. And I think they had a little bit of a downtime in that, which is very rare, and had to rely on some outside resources in order to make the call. And turns out I don't think the right call was made.
This speaks to a whole lot of things, doesn't it? Bigger picture stuff, like how tense it is, how close the boats are getting to each other, as Ben Ainsley knows so well. This is new, isn't it? That there is so much speed and they are so close to each other, and therefore it puts more pressure than ever before on the umpires.
Listen, there's no doubt about it. But listen, in the most famous rugby matches, or in our NFL football or hockey or baseball or cricket or whatever, the higher the level and the better the athletes, the more that umpires are under pressure. Now, I think the system that these umpires have is unbelievably good and technical, and will give them the ability to sit in a back room and make the right call. Now, every once in a while, there's going to be a technical glitch, and that technical glitch may have cost a race for Sweden, and may have done good things for Team New Zealand today. But you know what? It's all going to even out in the end. And I personally don't think, I'm very proud of the umpires for putting their hand up, but I would not think going forward that this is going to become a major issue, because I don't know if it's ever happened before, and I'm guessing it's not going to happen again.
Right, so Artemis are not going to go home at the end of this first round as a result of losing this race?
No, Artemis is too fast. First of all, if I'm a Team New Zealand fan, I'm looking at that race going, Artemis was ripping at times.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they were fast. So I'd be more nervous about that than I would be about the right or a wrong call. This is a long haul here, and all these guys have the innovation that's happening by the day. There were 9 passes in that race, which is it's unbelievable. Actually, that race. Forget who won and lost that race. That race was, I hate the word, but that race was epic in sailing history, maybe. And so this is exciting stuff. And I just think as fans, let's forget who won and lost that race. Let's appreciate how cool that race really was.
Ken Reid from Bermuda. A notorious prisoner who threatened a guard with a shank has been sentenced to a further 21 months in jail, but it won't result in a longer sentence. George Charlie Baker appeared at the North Shore District Court today after being found guilty of threatening to cause grievous bodily harm. Baker is already serving a life sentence for murdering 17-year-old Liam Ashley in the back of a prison van in 2006. Many of you will remember that case. Our Auckland Court reporter Edward Gay filed this report.
George Baker's also serving preventive detention for a hostage siege at the country's maximum security prison at Peremeremo, where he kidnapped an 82-year-old inmate, and a second attack in a prison van when he tried to kidnap a guard. Today he was flanked by 5 guards in the dock and handcuffed to one of them. There were 2 other security officers in the public gallery. Baker stood passively as the lawyers made their submissions, and Judge Jonathan Downs set out what happened inside Peremeremo in August last year. The judge said some of the guards were helping Baker shift cells. He said Baker felt threatened by the increase in guard numbers in the wing and began talking about wanting a fight. He then threatened a guard with a shank.
After a number of minutes being talked down by one of the more senior officers with whom you had a decent relationship, that you did back off. You dropped the shank that you had picked up, a homemade weapon, and you were then taken into the cell by other officers, and the incident was over without any injury.
Baker's lawyer Annabel Cresswell pointed to a psychological report which shows Baker has a borderline personality disorder that makes him prone to resorting to violence.
She said he's likely to overreact to misconstrued threats and experience physical sensations of agitation and panic that cause him to act violently.
Ms Cresswell encouraged Judge Down to impose a sentence that's effectively a good behaviour bond.
We may be reaching a point where, as he is becoming more mature, he's looking forward. It says he holds some positive goals for the future, and he is motivated to succeed and belong.
But Judge Down said he needed to send a message. He said although he couldn't add to Baker's life sentence, it was important the incident was flagged to the parole board, who would assess Baker for a possible release from prison in 2026. In sentencing Baker to 21 months in prison, the judge took time off for Baker's personality disorder and the violence he witnessed as a child.
I understand, and I do have sympathy for the position that you find yourself in. I do recognise that through no fault of your own, and the violence and poor parenting of others, that you struggle with the ability to control your temper.
He said that didn't excuse Baker's actions, but went some way to explaining them. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gay ahau.
Universities in New Zealand and Australia are banding together to stop people falsely claiming degrees and qualifications. They say international studies show 1/3 of qualifications claimed in job and course applications are exaggerated or even entirely false. Now they're adopting a new electronic system for storing student records. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
The Chief Executive of Universities New Zealand, Chris Whelan, says nobody knows how many fake New Zealand qualifications are out there, but they're definitely available.
We pick up a few examples, and we know that there are websites internationally that actually offer forged copies of New Zealand sort of degrees and transcripts. So clearly there is an industry out there. But of course we've got no statistics to know exactly who is doing it. We just pick it up by exception.
Chris Whelan says that's one reason all New Zealand and Australian universities are adopting the MyEqual system. It allows students to log into a secure site to see and share digital copies of their qualifications that can't be faked.
When the Chinese introduced a similar system, they found that they went from 28% of all the degrees that were referred to them being fake down to 3% over just about a 5 or 6 year period, just purely as a consequence of stronger systems and checking.
A company owned by Australian universities runs the service, and its chief executive, Andrew Trinacic, says it makes it a lot harder for people to claim qualifications they don't have from the participating institutions.
There's some very clever technology behind it. We're using the latest in encryption technology, and that's constantly being reviewed and updated. So it's not really possible for somebody to issue a fake document through the node. If you're not at the right domain name, if you're not at the right platform, you know that you're actually not reviewing a legitimate document.
The University of Auckland is the first university here to pilot the system. Its Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Adrian Cleland, says fraud is not yet a problem for Auckland, and MyEqual's main impact is to eliminate the work involved in giving students copies of their qualifications.
Every year we have about 13,000 requests for transcripts and letters that we've previously been dealing with through a portal and providing hard copies of documents. And this will enable our alumni and students to download this certified qualification directly themselves.
Adrian Cleland says the university has uploaded qualifications from 2010 onwards onto the new site, and it's had a lot of demand.
We launched in April, and from that time to now we've had 14,638 documents accessed, which is more than what we had thought would be, and about 2,000 documents shared with an employer or another university.
The system is being rolled out to other New Zealand universities by March next year. It'll be up to individual institutions to decide if they'll charge for the service. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
Efforts to reduce the amount of junk food advertising targeting children are being panned before they've even been introduced. The new Children's and Young Persons Advertising Code takes effect from July, but critics say the definitions under the new code are too vague and won't hold advertisers to account. The criticism comes as new research shows most of the foods advertised on New Zealand television are unhealthy and mostly target children. Catherine Hutton reports.
Auckland University research out today shows more than 2/3 of the food advertised on television contain products which, under World Health Organization standards, shouldn't be marketed to children. Nearly 90% were shown during children's peak viewing times, and many used promotional characters and giveaways to entice children. More than 15 unhealthy food advertisements screened each hour, most targeting children. Research fellow Stephanie von der Wevere says these ads air when a lot of children are watching television.
During 6 to 7 in the evening, there are still 120,000 5 to 13-year-olds watching, and if there's on average 15 unhealthy food advertisements per hour, then that creates about 2 million impacts per hour for unhealthy food advertising.
And she says the new advertising code will do little to reduce the exposure to harmful food advertising. Under the new code, advertisers need to take care when a quarter of the audience are children. Dr von der Wevere says that's a nonsense.
Children don't even make up that proportion in the total population, so that means none of the hours would basically meet that kind of definition. So even if it could be changed to hours during which 25% of the total children are watching, then even that would have substantial impact to reduce exposure.
Obesity expert Robin Toomuth agrees the 25% rule is meaningless.
The number of children watching that is the issue at stake, and we know that children watch television at quite young ages up until 9 o'clock at night. So it's absolutely clear-cut that if you don't want kids to be bombarded by ads which are going to be unhelpful for them, then they should not be shown before 9 o'clock at night.
She says if the goal is to protect children from the adverse influence of junk food advertising, then the new code should be more explicit.
There's heaps of evidence to show that children who watch television are eating the food which is advertised on television, and the vast majority of the food that's advertised on television is unhealthy food. So if you join up the dots, we should not have junk food advertising on television before 9 o'clock at night.
Both women want the government to step in and regulate, saying leaving it up to advertisers isn't the answer. But the head of the Advertising Standards Authority, Hilary Suter, says the critics have got it wrong, and the new code does bolster the restrictions on junk food advertising to children.
The rule says that if you are an occasional food or beverage and you're a product that will appeal to children, and execution that children will find attractive, and talking to an audience of children, then the ad is not permissive under our new coverage.
She says people suggesting a ban on junk food advertising before 9 o'clock are not taking into account the number of people who get their entertainment on other platforms. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
Some breaking news just in with the time coming up to 6:29. A police officer has been struck in the chest with a steel pellet during a violent struggle with a man in the Auckland suburb of Royal Oak this afternoon. Police were called to Manukau Road after receiving reports of a man acting suspiciously. The man fired at the police 6 times with a gas-powered steel pellet BB gun. The bullets hit a police vehicle, denting it and shattering a window. Pepper spray was used to disarm the 44-year-old man, and he was taken into custody. He was also found to have a large knife. One of the officers needed medical treatment for a cut to his face he sustained during the struggle. The man will appear in the Auckland District Court tomorrow. That, Justin. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. Lots of feedback tonight on those 2 Year 13 students saying, hey, remove the GST on sanitary products. Well, Jeff says, hi folks, those girls have cracked it. The answer is Pharmac. With its buying power, it would be able to source tampons for a fraction of the retail price. And also, their petition is on change.org.nz. 25,000 signatures and rising. Thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. We'll be back tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A man has been arrested in Auckland after a BB gun was fired at least 6 times at police officers, hitting one in the vest and damaging a patrol car. Wellington Region's mayors have directed their economic agency to begin investigating the case for an 8,000 to 12,000 seat arena. The decision on the site to build a giant water treatment plant in West Auckland has sparked both outrage and relief. Advertisers are rejecting claims that a new advertising code would expose children to more junk food advertising on television. The group that sets how much sugar should be in sports drinks says it won't be reviewing its guidelines until it's proven low-sugar products are just as effective. Universities are confident a new computerised system will stop people faking their degrees. A powerful cyclone is battering Bangladesh with lashing rain and winds after causing deadly flooding and landslides in Sri Lanka. The former military ruler of Panama, Manuel Noriega,